You may be seated. All that dwell below the skies, let songs of hope and faith arise. Let peace goodwill onward be sung, through every land by every tongue. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve all alike with compassion, to the end that all souls shall grow in harmony with God. This is our great covenant, one with another and with God. You may be seated.
Good morning. My name is Lauren Strauss. I'm the Director of Religious Exploration here at First Parish in Framingham. I use she, her pronouns, and I invite you to say with me, good morning and welcome to church. Something that I learned really early in my time as a religious educator is that covenants are not just rules that kids make in RE. They are central to our faith, and they're not just rules. To be a covenant, it has to be two things. One, it has to be co-created by the people who follow it. And two, it must be values-based. To be a good covenant, it also must be a living document, and that means that people can both change it when needed and actively use it during conflict. Otherwise, it's a wall hanging. When I went over to Watertown as their DRE, I discovered that they, along with a lot of other UU churches, use a different spoken affirmation than the one we just did. It's similar to ours, but it's different enough that it took me a while to remember it, and they also put it before the sung one, and it was really confusing. But anyway, it's called the Blake Covenant because it was written by James Vila Blake. Ours was originally arranged by L. Griswold Williams, and First Parish in Framingham has wordsmithed it over time, so it is no longer exactly like the one that you will find in your hymnal. It is in there. But the Blake Covenant remains exactly as Blake wrote it in the early 20th century, and it goes like this. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Coming as I do from a proud lineage of conflict-avoidant people, I made those last 3 lines my touchstone. I repeated them to myself both during conflict and when I wasn't in conflict at all, so they would always be in my pocket, ready to come out. Doing that made it so much easier to be brave when someone was acting out of covenant, which is something a DRE needs to do no matter how much conflict makes her want to hide in a blanket fort. Anytime I found myself in conflict or getting into sticky ground with someone at church, I turned to these 3 lines and I checked them. Are we dwelling together in peace? Are we seeking the truth in love? Are we helping one another? When you're in a conflict that feels bad, at least one of those things is out of whack. Like if someone is 100% convinced they're right and won't listen to another opinion, seeking the truth, yes. In love, nope. Sometimes all three are off. The minute someone starts yelling, you're not dwelling together in peace, seeking the truth in love, or helping one another. So then what? When I'm in a conflict, I have to do a self-check to make sure that I'm not the one who's out of covenant. Am I refusing to budge? Am I bulldozing over other people? Am I being unkind? Am I yelling? If I am, I excuse myself. I am out of covenant with you, and I need a break, I say. I will come back when I'm calm, and we'll try again. If it isn't me, I say, listen, we are out of covenant with one another. I need us to step back and take a break. I will wait until you are ready to stay in covenant for this conversation. If that's 5 minutes, great. If it's an hour or a day or a week, that's fine too. I want to be in this conversation, but you and I, as members of this church, have already agreed how we're going to be together, and right now, you're not following that agreement. Once we come back together, we have to do a little repair work. That might mean an apology, and it might mean restating our agreements. It depends on the situation, but we cannot skip this step. Trying to breeze over the bruises on our relationship to get back to business will end up making those bruises bigger and worse. Lots of times we think making the covenant is some kind of magic that will cure all our conflicts. But no, the magic is in our UU covenants comes when we break them. Breaking them gives us a chance to work together, to come back to covenant, to a place where we dwell together in peace, seek the truth in love, and help one another. Thank you. And now, if the children will, and parents and teachers will join me as we sing our children out, we will go to religious exploration.
Now is the time in our service that we set aside for sharing of the things which weigh deepest on our hearts. Reminder, you can write down these joys or sorrows at the book that's at the beginning of the service at the back of the sanctuary, or you can submit them online. Carol B. writes, "We are very glad that my brother-in-law Dan is doing very well and improved dramatically in his treatment for multiple melanoma diagnosed earlier this year." Let us now sing the first verse of Comfort Me. Robin writes, climate change continues to be a serious concern. Nevertheless, I really enjoyed those sunny days in the 70s in November. Let us now sing the second verse of Comfort Me. I share this joy from Andre, who writes, gratitude for the full belly of delicious breakfast food this morning. And I will add a thanks to Beth Walton and all who helped make the breakfast possible. And Andre goes back and writes, request, can I have the recipe for the French toast casserole? We will light one final candle for all of the joys and sorrows that remain too great to share this day. We will sing one final verse of Comfort Me. We move further into our time for contemplation, meditation, and prayer, returning to that breath that we called attention to at the beginning of our time together, feeling the chair supporting us, and imagining connection to the ground beneath us. O Spirit of life and love, named and unnamed, but who calls us each by our true first name, the name before our name was uttered out loud, beloved. Compared to the leaves falling from the sky, changing, soon decaying, we are strong, tough. We tend to live long lives. We will live to see many autumns. But compared to the stone, which is hard, permanent, and forged in fire, our skin is soft, our lives transient, and we are tender-hearted. We were woven together in wombs. Both ways of being are good and necessary. Help us to keep perspective. We give thanks for this community, for warm weather, for loved ones who are healing, and for time spent together in community. We also need courage and compassion to reach out to those who mourn and those who are ill. May we work to bring peace to all of the war-torn parts of our world. I also pray this Sunday closest to Veterans Day for those who served in our nation's military. I give thanks for their service, and also I know that service is often complicated. The wounds that we see and the wounds that we do not see can be painful. I pray that our nation provides the support that veterans need so that they might live full and productive lives filled with joy and free from pain. From time to time, we will be reminded, no matter our age, that we are still beginners at living life. We will make mistakes. We will not be our best selves. In those times when we feel like we could have done more, may we be reminded that we are loved and lovable, not in spite of these imperfections, but because of them. And let us be reminded that we are also not beginners. We live lives of integrity, compassion, and joy. I say these words and do all things for love's sake. Let us now sit in the quiet of this ancient house so that we might rest, listen, or simply do nothing for 1 whole minute. I'll keep track of the time. May it be so, and amen. And now Eileen will share some words about our Share the Plate offering recipient, the Metro West Free Medical Program.
Good morning. The Metro West Free Medical Program provides free medical care for people who don't have insurance or who are underinsured. Most people in this congregation are very familiar with the program because for 13 years we operated the Women's Health Clinic and the Vision Clinic out of 110 Edgell Road. The General Medical Clinic operated out of Temple Bethel in Sudbury. And it was in Sudbury for 16 years and here at First Parish at 110 for 13 years. During that time, we saw about 25,000 patients that did not have insurance and probably would not have gotten care otherwise. And then COVID hit, and we realized that we needed to change our model to operate safely and provide care safely. We had an increase in the number of people that were accessing us for care, and First Parish decided to sell 110. So we realized that we needed to find a new home. And we have spent the last year looking for a new home for the Metro West Free Medical Program. In the meantime, we've been offering care out of the community health center downtown. They offered us a small space, so we have been seeing some patients. But during this last year, we've worked with realtors, we've worked our networks, we followed up leads, trying to find a new home for the free medical program. And I'm happy to announce that we have found a really great new space that we moved into and started seeing patients in last week. It's located in Marlboro. It's at 246 Maple Street in Marlboro. It's really a beautiful space. It's an office suite that has been converted to a medical clinic, so it has a nice reception area, which you can see on the flyer that was handed out today. A nice waiting room, and 4 really good-sized exam rooms, so we can really expand the care that we're giving to patients. And this is really important because we have a very large waiting list. We have about 300 people on our waiting list. Some have been on it for months and months, and we've tried to whittle it down and contact people and find out if they still need care, and they do. They haven't been able to find someplace else to get medical care. I volunteered at our new space last week, and it was really beautiful. And among the patients that I saw a teenager who needed birth control, who had no other place to get it. I saw another young woman who had an abnormal pap smear and needed follow-up to prevent her from getting cancer later on. I saw somebody else with a worrisome breast lump that needed diagnostic imaging and evaluation. and then another patient with very severe anemia that needed immediate workup. So there are real needs out there, and the medical program is very happy to be able to provide this service and meet those needs. Our funding comes from donations and grants and foundations. All the care that's given is given free of charge. It's given by volunteer clinicians and a whole host of other volunteers, many from First Parish who have volunteered in the program. So any donation that you can make will be gratefully received, and I assure you will be put to good use.
A Ritual to Read to One Another by William E. Stafford. If you don't know the kind of person I am, and I don't know the kind of person you are, a pattern that others made may prevail in the world, and following the wrong God home, we may miss our star. For there is many a small betrayal in the mind, a shrug that lets the fragile sequence break, sending with shouts the horrible errors of childhood, storming out to play through the broken dike, and as elephants parade, holding each elephant's tail. But if one wanders the circus, won't find the park. I call it cruel, and may be the root of all cruelty, to know that occurs, but not recognize the fact. And so I appeal to a voice, to something shadowy, a remote important region in all who talk. Though we could fool each other, we should consider, lest the parade of our mutual life get lost in the dark. For it is important that awake people be awake, or breaking line may discourage them back to sleep. The signals we give, yes or no, maybe, should be clear. The darkness around us is deep.
Well, before we go any further, choir, my goodness, that offertory was beautiful, stunning. Thank you for your work. Yeah. So last July, I did this thing that I often do in the summer when I'm not sure what needs to be said. We did a question box service, hearkening back to the tradition that we have in the Our Whole Lives Comprehensive Sexuality Education Program, where people can ask anything and people will try to respond with answers. This kind of sermon on the spot I always find fascinating, to hear and figure out what is on your mind. There were a number of variations of the question, how do I have conversations and discussions about challenging topics with people who I disagree with? I pondered this question, and I think I answered it okay that day, but since I don't remember how I answered it, I figured having 3 or 4 months to come up with a good response would be best. Now, from that question box service, I went off on a family vacation with my wife's family. We went to a campground in West Michigan. Around day 2, we noticed that there was this man driving a golf cart around the perimeter road of the campground. And on the back of his golf cart, there was a large flag that was proclaiming his chosen presidential candidate. Kept driving around, kicking up dust and raising the blood pressure of most, if not all, of our family. And one day, we'd gone to the pool, and I was walking back from it, and the golf cart pulled right in front of me. And I paused and made a gesture much like I did right now. So I wanted him to continue on, and I said, "You want to go?" In retrospect, those might not have been the right words to say. I don't know if he actually heard what I said, because he made a comment about my burnt orange baseball cap, asking if I was from Texas. Now, I was familiar enough with the University of Texas Longhorns and the Texas A&M Aggie rivalry to know what the colors meant, and that it was a silly enough rivalry between 2 fine universities. I said no, it wasn't from Texas, it was from a Western Michigan baseball team. I asked him if he was an Aggie, and he said no. The conversation continued on. My heart was beating and I was sweating a little bit. Now, I don't know how we started off on this path, but soon a story emerged that started to rewrite the story that I had written about him. He had recently lost his wife about 2 months prior. She and him had been coming to this campground for a very long time. They knew everybody there. And he had bought the golf cart to drive her around, assuming that her cancer treatment would continue on. Instead, she had died before they got the chance to use it. He told me that he was driving around in her memory, and so that he could be out of the camper that they had shared for many summers. Along the way, he expressed his anger about God, who, in his theology, had let cancer take over his wife's body very quickly. His best friend was dead. He talked about his grief, and I talked about the grieving process with him. Now, as the conversation wound down, or maybe it was in the middle, I don't know. Sometimes when you're in a tough situation, time doesn't seem to line up. He asked me if his flag offended me. You know, the one that proclaimed his favored presidential candidate for 2020 and 2024. Without waiting for a reply, he finished the story that he had about me in his head and said, yes, probably does, doesn't it? I said something along the lines of, I thought that a private campground wasn't the place to express political views such as this, and offered some other platitudes and wished him well as he continued to grieve his wife's death. I thought of you, dear congregation. You were with me in that campground. And that question that we wondered about together was in my head. How do I have conversations with people that I disagree with? Now, throughout it, I practiced my best active listening skills, mostly. I froze and could not reflect back the fairly misogynistic things that he said from time to time. I wish that I could have had a better answer to his question about if his flag offended me. I had hoped that I would gain some deeper understanding of how to have conversations across the political divide and could come back to you with flowcharts and graphs and all of this. Instead, I relearned a few key lessons. I was reminded that people often contain multitudes. You never know the joy or suffering someone is undergoing. Try not to write someone else's story for them. Someone's heart is always breaking. But things are usually more complex and challenging than they first appear to be. Now, did this conversation change me or Tim, the man that I was talking with? No, probably not. He was not going to be replacing his flag with another flag. But maybe it made me a little bit kinder. Maybe his grieving heart was healed a little bit. Maybe that's enough. Now, when I started this conversation with Tim, I remember that how my body felt change. Heart was pounding. There was sort of a tunnel vision that I got. My body felt warm. This is a common response when our bodies are under threat. You might know the feeling. It's called emotional flooding. I learned about it first from the work of marriage therapists John and Julie Goffman. Carrie Rusnick, who's a therapist who practices their particular method of marriage therapy, explains it this way. Flooding, or diffuse physiological arousal, is the body's alarm system to help you respond to help you escape a perceived threat. When physical harm threatens you, like a speeding car through a crosswalk, your body goes into fight or flight mode. Adrenaline surges through your body to help prepare the threat, to help prepare to fight the threat or get away quickly. Your heart rate increases, your breathing quickens, your digestion slows down, your blood pressure increases, and it's all to help you get to safety. You can't focus to listen or to speak clearly. This happens during times of physical danger and also emotional danger. I wonder if that is what the poet is speaking about that we heard from earlier in ritual to read to each other that Rupal read a few moments ago. Now, as I preach this today, the election is not yet settled, mostly. People on both sides of the political spectrum are happy and sad. People are elated and frightened. We have once again reduced the map of our country to blue states and red states. This dichotomy, I feel, is unhelpful. Even reducing counties, towns, or congressional districts down to red or blue is unhelpful. When we do that, we reduce an area to a singular political identity, which does not capture the nuances of belief of that geographic area. It does not capture the silencing of voices due to voter suppression or gerrymandering. Reducing states to blue or red does not lift up the voices of the vital progressive grassroots organizing that is happening there. I know from serving congregations in Texas and Kansas that that work happens on the ground. It does not capture the very real fear of the havoc that state governments can wreak on people's lives and livelihood. No matter what, our work as a faith community continues on. But the question is often asked, how did we get here? So I went looking for an answer, because it's one of those big questions that's always the elephant in the room. Partially, it's the creation of mega-identities, M-E-G-A, mega-identities. Eli Finkel and Cynthia Wang explain that mega-identities have grown almost mutually incomprehensible. Studies show that each group dramatically misperceives the other. Some researchers did a survey on this. I'm not sure the extent of who was surveyed, but in their survey, they said that Republicans estimate that 32% of Democrats are lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender, when in reality it's 6%. Democrats estimate that 38% of Republicans earn over $250,000 per year, when in reality it's 2%. And so the misperceptions continue on. Finkel and Wang also go on to say that these identities are reinforced by dueling media ecosystems, which the researchers say can be traced back to the Reagan administration's move to terminate the fairness doctrine put in place after World War II to reduce bias in broadcasting. These two professors from Northwestern University explain that polarization is actually not the problem. They write that clear, well-articulated differences across political parties are a good thing. The problem is that Americans have grown hateful toward opposing partisans based more on a religion-like social identity than on actual disagreements about politics. With that phrase, religion-like social identity, a light bulb went off. We do, in fact, have good examples of cross-belief exchange found in interfaith and interreligious dialogue. Conversations that are meant to deepen our own understanding of the other, perhaps to create peace. Not conversation meant to say why the other person is wrong and they are right. Conversation with the goal of learning about another faith, not conversion to another faith. Now, these two professors do have some good responses about how to cool the political temperature, but we are a religious institution, so a religious framework is better shared in this setting. Catherine Cornell, in her book, The Impossibility of Interreligious Dialogue, breaks down 5 essential points for interreligious dialogue. The first condition is doctrinal or epistemic humility, which basically says we must admit that our way of understanding the world, what we believe to be true based on our religion, is finite and fallible. The second condition is a commitment to a particular religious tradition. If interreligious dialogue is to remain truly interreligious, the conversation partners must be firmly committed to their religious tradition and open to others. This is where Unitarian Universalism is exceptionally good and can be challenging when we enter into interreligious dialogue. Because we are open to others. We have sources that draw from many different world religions. But it also makes it challenging, because we have to figure out what is essentially and what is truly Unitarian Universalist. Indeed, our sources talk a lot about other religions, but not about our own. The third condition for interreligious dialogue is interconnection. This seems obvious to me, but we have to believe that someone else's teachings are relevant and interconnected to my own religious understandings. And there has to be some point to this interaction. Perhaps a shared commitment to a cause or shared reaction to external challenges. When I served a congregation in College Station, Texas, we partnered a lot as an interfaith community with the Roman Catholic churches in town around immigration issues. But on other issues, we did not talk to them. We had a shared commitment, or rather, they would not come to us either. The fourth condition for interreligious dialogue is empathy. This means we get into our relationships from not just an intellectual viewpoint, but also a relational and emotional understanding of the other. It means we move beyond what does the sacred text about the religion say, to what does this text mean to the life of a practitioner of that religion. What does this person feel when they read this? Why do they turn to this religious text? And the final condition for interreligious dialogue is hospitality. This is partially about realizing that the truth of another religion is valid, but further welcoming the practices and the people of that religion. Hospitality is, yes, the last condition in Catherine's book, but without it, I don't think you can truly have dialogue. Again, I share them because I think that they can be a useful framework for how to have these conversations across differences. Maybe you're about to embark on Thanksgiving dinner with family soon, and there will be people that you know disagree with you. How will you interact? Perhaps some of these conditions might be helpful. These conditions, in fact, work their way into a covenant, like what Lauren was talking about earlier. We tried to do a lot of this interreligious work in the seminary that I went to. Andover Newton Theological School, now dearly departed, down to Yale, at the time shared a hillside with the Hebrew College Rabbinical School. And there were a lot of opportunities to have these conversations. My favorite was a class on a really juicy topic. It was called Biblical Ecology. And it gathered together Jewish and Christian and Unitarian Universalist leaders to talk about the roots of environmentalism from the source texts of these religions, as well as the writings of Wendell Berry. Years later, I was reminiscing with one of the professors of this class about how much I enjoyed this class. And he told me, he confessed to me actually, saying that as a faculty, we thought it was a failure. And I said, oh, a failure? That was one of my favorite classes. I said, well, you see, normally in these classes you have disagreement. The rabbinical school students are asking the Christian students, how do you get your Jesus from my book of Isaiah? And Unitarians are usually just curious about the nature of Jesus. Instead, y'all, he was from Kentucky, so he said y'all, instead y'all just agreed about how much humans had messed up the earth. There was no disagreement. And you know, for a long time, I decided to agree with him. But I wonder now, did we in fact fail? Several years later, I disagree with that assessment. If the goal of the class was to argue and get into disagreements, then yes, we did fail. But if the goal was to strengthen partnership between leaders of different faith traditions for the greatest group project of all time, that is responding to the climate crisis, then we did not fail. We learned how to talk across differences. Now, I don't want you to walk away from this sermon thinking that I'm asking you to have conversations with people who deny the inherent worth and dignity of very core parts of who you are or who your loved ones are. Absolutely not. Your life is too beautiful, too wild and precious to ask you to do that. Simply to think, when there is a willing conversation partner who is across difference from you, how do you have a conversation with them? What made all of these interfaith conversations successful, I even hate to use that word, successful, what makes them able to promote further growth was that the parties wanted to be there. They approached it with genuine curiosity. They knew that they were not trying to change the other person, but rather deepen their own personal understanding. The engagement was genuine and authentic. The president of my seminary was fond of saying in interfaith conversations, we do not ask you to go to the lowest common denominator, but rather to go to the highest moral calling. Interfaith conversations did not make watered down generic store brand religious leaders. Instead, it made better Christian pastors, Jewish rabbis, and Unitarian Universalist ministers. This is why I have always participated in interfaith and ecumenical clergy groups wherever I serve. In September, the Framingham Interfaith Community Association discussed what the purpose of our interfaith association might be. Oftentimes, we all reflected together. We come together around a shared celebration or observance, around Thanksgiving, which we are on November 20th at 5 p.m. over at Temple Bet Shalom. And these are good. It's good to come together for these observances, or we come together when something bad has happened in one of our communities. But I was reminded further of the example that the president of my seminary and the president of the rabbinical set, they told us, and they then videotaped these conversations, that they sat for an hour each week together. They looked at shared sacred texts and gathered in the Jewish practice of Havruta, meaning companionship. They used the text that they were looking at to have conversations about what it meant to be a leader of a institute of higher education that was committed to the formation of faith leaders. Which meant that when I participated in the conversation back in September, I imagined this: what if the boards of our congregations came together and discussed leading in Framingham in the 21st century? What if our administrators got together and chatted, not just about who we're using for snowplowing, though I know we do that, correct, Sarah? You do have those conversations. Those are important. But got together and chatted more. What if maintenance councils came together to talk about the shared commitment they had to buildings? Surely we have stuff to share with the folks over at Plymouth. Our churches are similar vintage and build, after all. What I'm trying to say is I'm about boring partnerships. I'm about the partnerships that are focused on the nitty-gritty, because it's those boring partnerships that strengthen our communities when things get more challenging. The boring and the mundane conversations, which are really about the administrative ministries of our congregations, make a fine foundation for further, deeper work. Because the good, exciting work still needs to get done, as does the boring stuff. So my friends gathered here, how do we have conversation across the political divide? With humility, commitment, interconnection, empathy, and hospitality. Each of these must exist in every conversation partner. Without it, it's not conversation, it's confrontation. It goes back to that part, I go back to that part about commitment. It is good to have well-defined beliefs. Indeed, in a world of rising authoritarianism, deeply held commitments and values will be what the world needs if we're to build the world that we dream about. As William Stafford wrote, if I don't know the kind of person I am, and I don't know the kind of person you are, a pattern that others made may prevail in the world, and following the wrong God home, we may miss our star. May it be so, and amen. Well, let us rise in body or spirit to sing our closing hymn, which I don't have it written down. What is it? 1020. And so as we leave this friendly place, let us take the light of love out into the world and use it to brighten our pathways. And when we need to rest or recharge, be challenged or affirmed, may that light guide us safely back. May we hold the light always, and the light hold us always. Amen, and go in peace.